Hey, this is Jon Croft with Culture Warfare with Jon Croft, and I'm Jon Croft. And we have Rebecca here tonight. How are you doing, Rebecca?
I'm doing great, John. I
Good.
enjoyed our I enjoyed our conversation earlier
Oh,
about
you
Dragon
enjoyed
Slayer.
the Meeting Moses Weekly topics?
I enjoyed the Meeting Moses Weekly topics. Dragon Slayer was awesome,
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciated your article on Narnia, what's going on with the Chronicles of Narnia. What else did we talk about? Wing feather art.
Wing feather art. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've been a little out of it this week, but we did get some really good topics. And you know what the other topic I was going to talk about this week, but I didn't get a chance. And this is a lot of the reason I was kind of confused because I wanted to talk about it, but I never got to write an article about it. Was sketch.
mm,
And then I realized, well, I'm probably not going to be able to see it early, like a lot of reviewers get to watch stuff early. I'm probably not going to be able to, but I thought it was cool though that one of the guys who contacted me about an interview this week, which by the way was so cool, I mentioned it, Meeting Moses Weekly. He said he was introduced to me through my review of Sketch. And so it wasn't really a review, it was just kind of my article on it because I haven't seen Sketch yet. But I know it's going to be great because I've seen lots of Seth Worley stuff, and I know about Steve Taylor stuff. His stuff is incredible as well. I love Steve Taylor, and so I trust anything he's going to be working on. But Seth Worley is great, and Steve Taylor knew him when he was like 19 and was helping him to become a great filmmaker, and that's pretty exciting. So I can't wait for Sketch. It's coming out this coming week, and that's exciting. So I need to write an article on that this coming week, and I'll probably be seeing it. Um, I guess next Thursday, maybe Thursday or
yeah,
Friday.
we're excited about Sketch too.
Yeah. Well, and remember how I talked about how Christians need to be making more of these kinds of films? And I mentioned, and this is so funny that this is like a throwaway line someone said, but it's so important, actually. It was in the interview with Steve Taylor I watched. He said, guess what? We talked to some distributors from Barcelona. This totally plays into what I've been saying. If Christians make more work like this, they will be more successful. Why? Because the kind of faith-based work we've been making for the past 20 years is for Americans, not for the international market.
Mm-hmm.
And if we make stuff that's more interesting, artistic, it not only will bring Americans in, because it won't get so much criticism then by even Americans, but it'll bring in international audiences. And that's exactly what Steve Taylor said. He said there's people from Barcelona who they don't like anything, seems like. And he let them see it and they were like, oh, we need to get this. So this kind of product, right? If it breaks away from the faith-based genre, the way it's so strict, and it gets more creative and more whimsical and more fun, maybe, at least more artistically vital, right? You're going to get international audiences. It'll actually pay for that, hopefully. So I
That's
mean,
awesome.
how exciting. This is actually what I've made as a point for expanding the creativity of the faith-based genre is that actually you're going to make it more accessible to international audiences as well. So that's great. Hopefully Sketch will be very successful internationally and at the box office in the US. Obviously, the lion's share is going to come from the US, so you can understand some people not caring about the international market or whatever. But I don't think of these things just for the money's sake of it. I think of that as a side benefit. But to me, the art is worth it itself. Just doing the art, being more authentic with your art is a relationship thing between you and God. It's not about you and your fellow man. That's just a side benefit, but it is a benefit. and it shouldn't be ignored, right? That's you being, I think, really more ethically sound in your decision making. You've got investors to think about. You've got a lot of stuff to think about. But that shouldn't be the thing that comes first, right? The thing that comes first is your relationship with God. Are you making this for the right reasons, right? And so what are you really trying to accomplish with this thing? You trying to maintain your genre specific desires, to make yourself feel good about that? Because that's what it's going to do, right? Or are you going to be challenging yourself and others with art that is beautiful according to what the Holy Spirit says, right? It's not like God came to Moses and said, Moses, you're just my man. You do everything for me. Why don't you build the temple for me? You're so holy. If it was all about holiness, wouldn't Moses just build the temple, right? If it was all about him being a great preacher and preaching the gospel, right, of God's goodness in the world, right? How he is working through the Israelites in the wilderness, is going to preserve them. Wouldn't just Moses do it? But no, God blesses Bezalel and these particular artists. And it says God gifted them with all of these abilities. And then what did Moses have to do? He had to trust them and give it to them to do it. And you know what happened? More than enough was given. More than enough money came in, if that's your purpose, which should not be your purpose here. But the point is, you don't have to worry about the money now. Bezos shouldn't be going, oh, gee, I hope I get money out of this. That's absurd. No, but the point is, you don't have to worry about it because plenty will come forward. Why? Because you're being obedient to God. So we as artists, we have to be artistically authentic. That's our job. We shouldn't make this cynical, faith-based, genre strict stuff. No, to me, sketch breaks through that mold and makes something that's artistically vital. And so if we trust those people the way Moses trusted Bezalel, great stuff can happen from that. So we should be doing more of that. Hopefully, Angel will also put out a great movie this December called Zero AD. Hoping that's also going to be great. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah. And speaking of that, our main topic is how conservative art is the hardest art. This tweet says, on the question of whether conservative art and artists exist, the most difficult art is conservative art because it must be enduring. It must consider the entire context and history of our civilization. It's mythical, influential, and undeniable. Hollywood is now incapable of achieving this in society. And society in general has lost the taste for it. Right? This is why it barely exists today. It's not because conservative art or artists don't exist. So I'm responding here in many ways to criticisms of people who say conservative artists don't even exist, or they can't even make good art, or the artists themselves. It's like conservatives, almost like conservatism as a movement, cannot produce artists, right? And so I am a conservative Christian artist. So obviously I know this is not true. It's absurd. But what have I found it really difficult to get my art produced? And why is that? Because it's expensive. And so what does that mean? I can't afford it. And so what does that mean? I haven't been able to inspire Christians to help support my art because whenever I talk to them about art, they want to change my art. Why? And they're not artists and they don't know what they're talking about. So what do you think that means? It's immediately a power struggle between me and them, the money people, and me, the artist. And they believe what? That they don't need me. They could just make the art themselves. And that's exactly what they do. They make their own art. And it's not art. And that's because they're not artists and they don't understand art. And that's why you have the faith-based genre, because you have the people with the money who believe they can be also artists. Because why? They think art is easy. You just have to have some great ideas and some money, and you throw money at the screen, and now you have art. And they really believe this is art, right? They've lost they think it's all about the technology and some fun idea, like some plot twist or something, some contrivance. And so if I was to talk to them, this is a lot of the reason that they don't listen to me, right? And they don't listen to a lot of Christian or conservative artists. Why? Because when we talk about our ideas, it's really confounding and causes a lot of internal conflict. It's confusing, it's nuanced, it's difficult to understand. It's also difficult to trust that someone like me could pull it off, or like someone like them could pull it off, or that anybody could pull it off because they haven't seen it done. So they don't know if they can trust you with this whole project. But more importantly, they don't understand it, right? So do you think they're going to throw money at you? No, of course not. So the difficult for me has been making that first directorial debut for a feature film, which is thousands of dollars, right? And sure, I could do it for a small fraction of what the typical feature is made, but it's still a lot of money, right? So what most film investors need is a filmmaker who's just made their first film. And so they know that this filmmaker can make a film and they get an idea of what that film feels like and what it is and is this person talented? And then they will start investing in them. And that's not a bad way to do things. That's fine. But the truth is, it becomes then very difficult for artists because artists have to bear the burden of their first risks. And so it is very difficult. But guess what? It's even more difficult because why? This kind of art barely exists today. So when people see it, they don't even know what it is. And that's what I say here in this tweet. So it's not that conservative art and artists don't exist. It's that it's very difficult to create. Like I say, it must be enduring. So that means it um, passes the test of time, right? So obviously, this is not something that you can check off your list as soon as you make your art. This is something that is discovered through time. And so what people do instead is they look at your art and they say, does that bear resemblance to something that has been enduring in the past? But that's not something that artists can really do. And it's not something we want to do because we don't want to make our art that looks like everybody else's art. So our art is not supposed to look like something enduring. There's a lot of people don't understand. We're not even trying to make our art look enduring. Okay, so that's step number one. It must consider the entire context and history of our civilization. This is the nature of what makes it conservative, is there's context to it in the past. There's a precedent set in history that this kind of story not only does it do well, but it has to do with real things in our history, in our civilization. It's mythical. So now you have to understand myth at the same time. You have to understand these deeply enduring, meaningful stories that are tied to our culture. It's influential and it's undeniable. Influential comes after, right? It's seen and you get to see, oh, do people like it? Essentially. And you could say popular instead of influential, but I think influential is more accurate. Because anything can be popular for 5 minutes. That doesn't necessarily make it influential. So it's a little longer than a hot minute. It's a little more like enduring than just what's popular in the next 5 minutes. And it's undeniable. And that kind of ties into the fact that it's influential, but also enduring, right? So it's undeniably influential. It's undeniably enduring. It's undeniably useful and relevant, right? So these are all things that you can't know at first. But if you're an artist and you know the mythical, you know your civilization, you know your history, you know the context of the myths that surround us and make our culture what it is, then you can kind of get a good idea that the story that you are crafting has a chance of being influential, then enduring, then undeniable, because it has a smattering of the mythical in it and an understanding of the context of your history and your civilization. It doesn't have to focus necessarily on the artistic conventions, right? But the truth is, if you don't have that in there, you're also not going to get these other things. So those are the things that Hollywood cares about. They care about the artistic conventions, the aesthetic. Is the plot structure working? Are the characters relatable? These are far more surface level. And they're, yes, 90% of what your consideration is when you're making that film is those things. But guess what? Before that, you have to make sure that your story is mythical. So that's really, really the kind of filmmakers we need. People who are from the outset, from development into script writing, into pre-production, and then into production. All of this, the mythical nature of this story has been maintained and understood for what it is, and understood that this is what you're trying to do is maintain the values contained in these myths. And if you don't do that, it's not going to be enduring. It's not going to be influential or undeniable, right? It's going to lose all that potential. But Hollywood might like it because it's got some aesthetic, right? So that's not enough. It's not enough for us as conservative artists to just make something surface level that's going to be popular for 5 minutes, which is everything Hollywood's concerned about, right? That's because Hollywood does not make conservative art. So we have to not only be concerned about that, we also have to be concerned about if our film's going to be popular in 50 years. You see what I'm saying? It's far more difficult. And that comes, though, from the context that we get in the myths we study and our civilization and the context in that history of our civilization. So if you've studied these things, if you know our myths, if you know Beowulf, if you know Lord of the Rings, if you know St. George and the Dragon, if you know these stories, if you know the Bible and the Bible's powerful storytelling, you can embed much of this into your modern stories. So I talked about this a little bit already, which is that an artist has to be obsessed with the modern conventions and the modern aesthetic and the modern technology used. Why? To appeal to modern audiences and to make it relatable to modern audiences. But conservative artists have to do far more. They have to do that, and they also have to know the mythical nature of their own civilization. They have to know the great myths and the great stories that made our civilization what it is through history, right? So this is why in my tweet, as I say here, Hollywood is incapable of achieving this. It's too difficult for them. But guess what? They don't care anyway because they don't want to do that. you know? So they're not upset that they can't do this. They don't even want to do this. And this is also why society, I say society in general, has lost the taste for it. Hollywood not only doesn't have the nutritional value in their stories, in the meals that are supposed to be what a story is, it's just sweets for Hollywood. But society in general has also doesn't have the taste buds, doesn't have the enzymes to digest it. This this nutritious meat and potatoes meal, which is what conservative art has to be, right? So this is why it barely exists today, folks. This is why you don't see much of it. Hollywood isn't making it, they're not interested in making it, and they can't make it. Even if they tried, they couldn't make it, right? So it's not because conservative art or artists don't exist. It's because we're not interested in making it. And we don't even understand how to make it. You see? So that's a problem, obviously. This is a tweet from Jeffrey Tucker, who's a libertarian thinker, a well-known libertarian thinker. Sometimes he talks about pop culture, and he says here, it's worth watching movies from the 70s or 80s, if only to discover what life was like before instant personal communication by everyone. People did not have to unplug because they were never plugged in. Often the drama comes down to wondering where a certain person is with no means of contact. There are phones that ring at restaurants, and the waiter has to inform the diner of a phone call. There are phone booths with people lining up. Long distance was expensive. Other odd things. When the phone would ring on the wall or desk, you had no idea who it was calling. So you picked up and had to hear the voice and had to announce the name. You would meet someone and it was up to them to tell you about themselves because there were no globally accessible social media profiles to permit spying. It's all quite charming and gives rise the question whether we really are better off overall, or do we really just love our surveillance society state? So I don't think primarily this is about the surveillance state, although that is an interesting question here on the side. What the reason I read this tweet here is because what he's describing is a very conservative notion. The notion that our society has changed, the notion that conservative values might be tied to technology in some way, right? That technology makes us what we are now, and that in the 70s and 80s, when they had films that demonstrated the unique challenges of that time through the technology and the way we related to technology, means that people lived very differently back then. And here's the problem. People think this is what conservative filmmaking is about. They think conservative filmmaking is about showing a few different variety of changes that we go through every few decades with technology and with how that affects society. And there's nothing wrong with speculating about that. And in fact, there are some seriously challenging differences when you think about the society of that period versus the society of today. It's going to give your story a kind of a unique feel when you have to, call someone in a phone booth rather than your cell phone. Sure, it's going to be very different. But the truth is, conservative art is not about that. It's not about technology. It's not even about those quaint, universal, socially unique quirks that we had in the 70s or 80s compared to today, or that we had in the 50s compared to today. No. Conservative art is about universal values. the values that made that anonymity with a phone interesting and different and charming and good even, right? But you might say, well, your cell phone is my corded telephone on the wall, you know, or your your horse and buggy is my Audi or Tesla. So what? My preferences, your preferences, who cares? And the truth is, you're right. Who cares? Exactly. That's the point that I'm making. But what we do care about is morals and decency and our religious values and our kids' future and other things that really actually do matter. The values that undergird our society. Like, are we protecting our children when we send them to school? That is a different question to if we're giving them a cell phone or not. But it's related. Your child could be scandalized through a cell phone, couldn't it? But that's not because of the technology. That's because of what we've been doing with the technology. We haven't been using our values correctly with the technology, right? And that's really the point, is it's about the differences of values and how conservative art really is about those undergirding values. It's not just about technological changes. Truth is, remember how we talked about in Meeting Moses Weekly earlier? We talked about the Greeks, right? And we talked about the Parthenon and, the Acropolis and all these other things that were interesting and special. And there's this cool channel and talking about teaching our children about the Greeks. Well, the Greeks had a lot of silly ideas. They didn't know science the way we do now. They didn't know lots of stuff the way we do now. But guess what? Why is teaching them about the Greeks now so important? Why is teaching them about this ancient society, which, yes, was foundational to Western civilization, as well as the Christian culture, as well as the Jewish culture? These were very foundational cultures to Western civilization. But that's the question, is why? Why were the Greeks, who were so backwards, right? Why were, I'm not saying that Jews and Christians weren't backwards in their own way. Of course they were in their own way, but they were backwards in ways that did not matter. But what they were doing that mattered also has to matter to us today. What they were doing was powerful in terms of education, in terms of logic and thought, the quality of your thinking, in terms of language and origins of our language and culture, in terms of our religion and our holy days and the ways we treat things sacred. What the Greeks were doing is still relevant to our society today. And if you study the Romans and the Greeks, you'll see a lot of things in our society currently will have deeper meaning and deeper value. And you'll see that we're failing in ways today, like in government and in many other ways. We're failing in absurd ways that many Greeks and Romans would not do and would not fail at. You know? So they're still relevant because we can still learn from them. And the fact is, many of these people knew things we still don't even know today. It's absurd, really. And why are we not teaching them in school? That's the absurdity. It's totally absurd that our schools do not continue to improve education every year or every decade or at least every century. It should be getting better. Why are we going backwards? Like, literally, this is why we homeschool, because public schools are backwards. So the truth is, sure, not all conservative cultures and values are like the most forward-thinking ideas, right? Because that's not the point of them. The point of them is to provide your civilization with the basics to succeed. And then on top of that, you could maybe put electric cars or something. Sure, have fun with it. But if you don't have those basic moral principles, if those basic moral principles and ways of thinking and reasoning and logic aren't there, you could have any technology you want. Your society will fail. Like this is one thing that actually bothers me about Elon Musk, because Elon Musk is one of those people who I respect greatly, but he doesn't seem to have really barely any conservative values. And all the things that he seems to care about are so forward thinking. He'll send himself to Mars and our humanity will perish because he has no idea how to preserve humanity. Not one shred of any idea. And that's the thing is he continues to like focus in on technology as the solution to mankind. Well, if you have a problem with I'll just fix your brain. If you have a problem with this, I'll just fix it. If you have a problem with it, we'll just send you an electric car. Well, we'll just go to Mars. Like this is going to solve the real problems mankind has. It's just to leave and escape in your technology. No. Like this question was presented a long time ago. I think it was in the 50s with The Day the Earth Stood Still, I believe,
Okay.
which asked the question, is humanity capable of dealing with the kind of technology that can destroy through like nuclear weapons? Like, do we have enough responsibility in our world, like in the hearts of man, to not push that red button and kill all of mankind? And that basic question was about what's more important, technology or moral sense, moral decency? What's more important? Where are you going to put your eggs? If you had to put them in one basket, where are you going to put those eggs? More technology? Like, I've got a nuclear weapon now, haha. Or is it about your moral sense of decency? I have enough moral decency to not use a nuclear weapon, right? So if I get that nuclear weapon, I'm going to responsibly use it or not use it. I don't have to use it, right? But if you are not a morally decent person and you get a nuclear weapon, where does that leave mankind? So this essential question was presented. It's a very important question because it reveals the weakness of Elon Musk's argument, the weakness of our society. We continue to think that things like cell phones and electric vehicles and all these things will make us stronger and better. The truth is, no, it has to be moral values. And if you lose that basic foundational, the roots of our society, why we have these deep moral like struggles and questions we're dealing with. Whether it's ethics class, you want to pretend that it's not about God, sure, go ahead. But I think religion answers these questions far better. My true belief is that society needs to get more advanced, but not in a sense of technology, in a sense of moral decency. And so when we're talking about culture and we're talking about art, it's really a very similar answer. I'm not saying artists shouldn't use new technology. I'm saying that we have used art the same way the same way these people in the sciences and the military have used their power without moral decency. Right. And so the real question of what should win out, the temporary, technologically advanced and popular aesthetic of modern Hollywood, right, which focuses on things like technology, or the moral filmmaking and culture building required of a conservative artist who's going to apply themselves in terms of their moral values, in terms of their ability to tell mythical stories that are powerful and universally applicable to all of mankind. We haven't been doing that. And we're even losing the ability to do it. And until we start trusting our conservative artists again, not just artists who are good with the latest technology and can do very flashy and impressive work that that uses spectacle and technology instead of the foundations of storytelling, right? And the foundations of good characters and the foundations of good moral values in those stories. You can't even make a good story without good morals. A lot of people don't even realize that, you know. And the best stories are the conservative ones because they apply universally to mankind. There are things that you just understand deeply already: self sacrifice, love for neighbor. These are conservative values because they're Christian values. I think that's been an overlooked issue. Is the fact is it's just very difficult, expensive, um, and therefore risky to make conservative art. But we need people who understand the need for it enough to be willing to invest in it anyway, right? Because they have a calling to do it. God is sending them to do it. And there's really no other um, impetus to do it except that God is calling you to do it. Otherwise, why would you do it? Because I mean, film and a lot of art is very risky and expensive. So unless you really believe in this artist, you really believe in this cause, you really believe that making the right kinds of stories can help change society and make it better. And it's not just to make a buck, and it's not just to do something flashy and fun and entertaining, then you're going to be infused with a deeper encouragement and passion to do something like make conservative art, something where you don't expect to get any money out of it, but because the purpose and the cause is so important, you do it anyway, you know. So I
I
think
feel
that
like I feel like one of the key words here is art. Like there seems to be such an emphasis when you were initially talking about the faith-based market. There's such an emphasis on like creating something that evangelizes or that sells home a point, makes, I guess, just making a point, or is, trying to have some kind of result, some like change the viewer in some way,
right.
cause some kind of emotional reaction. And all of this is kind of presented as evangelism. And
Mm.
I'm not sure if it is, like, I don't know. Um, and then that tends to be more like what I think people, maybe Christians or conservatives, are excited about spending money on because they feel
Right.
like, because they have this kind of, it's almost like they have this kind of shame about entertainment.
Yeah.
Like, I can't create entertainment because there's something empty about it. And even just the word entertainment is
Right.
used rather than the word art. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're more apt to fund something or get excited to rally around something that feels like, oh, I'm spreading the gospel message. Whether they
Right.
really are or not, that's just what it feels like to
Yeah.
them, or that's how it's presented to them. Whereas when you come from a place of a person who is satisfied by goodness, and you're satisfied by Christ, and you're just overflowing with all this goodness, like I'm thinking mostly of scripture and the Holy Spirit, but you could also say, like, you could say these fairy tales and these legends of good overcoming evil.
Mm-hmm.
When you're overflowing with this story, then it comes very naturally to create art, and you're not trying to drive home some kind of point or message. You're
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah.
creating from a place of um
Like joy.
yeah, of joy and of authenticity,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
rather than I'm supposed to do this.
Well, that takes a real artist. It
Yeah.
takes somebody who's literally talented and blessed and oh, I bet your phone went dead. It takes someone who really is called and talented and blessed to do that work. Yes, we did lose Rebecca. Her phone went dead. But to wrap it up quickly, this is the whole point I've been making that conservatives, Christians need to actually hire and take a risk on real artists who are also conservative and Christian and know the deep, powerful stories that can actually help bring change to our culture. And the reason that the stories that they've been making cannot change culture and will not change culture is because they're not made by these authentically called artists. They have to be really called to do this work. And so you have to believe in that. If you believe in that, if you believe God has called people like Bezalel to make the temple, if you believe that God has provided for you and provided for the temple to be made, then you don't mind giving this money to those artists and providing for them and investing in them because that money was just given to the temple. It's not supposed to come back to you. It's for a deep God honoring purpose. And so you're sacrificing something to the Lord, right? That's the purpose of all this. The artist is sacrificing as well, right? They're sacrificing their time and their energy. They might be humiliated. They might be run out of town on a rail because society is not interested in the prophets of God. And a worldly society wants to destroy the Lord's people and the Lord's work. So these artists have to understand that they're going to be hated quite often by the rest of society for making the kind of work that will challenge society to do better and to become more moral, to challenge society even on the level of the Hays Code, to inspire our society to make better stories, even though they're not showing a little leg and being titillating and entertaining, right, to them and their own sensibility and their own tastes. We're not here to appeal to their tastes. We're not here to think as a worldly person, and we're not here to please man. We're here to please God as Christian artists. So you have to remember that these challenges are different um, for a conservative and a Christian artist versus the world's artists. These are very different, unique challenges, and you can't compare us. We have a higher calling, and we have to answer that calling instead of your calling and instead of Hollywood's calling. So this is very unique and it's very difficult to do. And so you need some patience, but also understand that this calling that you have is unique as well. This is a calling of belief and faith in God. It's a calling to change your tastes, to challenge yourself to do better, and to change who you're listening to. Are you listening to the world or are you listening to God's calling for you? So that's the important thing. The way to change culture is to search for those embedded messages planted in the Bible, in our myths, and find those values hidden like beautiful gems embedded in a mountain, right? So you're mining for the beautiful conservative values that do not die. They're universal, they're eternal, and they're very valuable. And if those things get embedded in art, it makes it even more valuable because that's like taking that stone and embedding it in a ring or in a piece of jewelry that can be used and worn and looked at, right? And now it becomes useful. And now it becomes a reminder daily of what God has for you, right? And what God's trying to teach you in your society. So this is a much larger journey for you to go on as a conservative artist than as a worldly artist. The challenges are different. The challenges are far greater. And so what you're making really is like a rocket to Mars instead of a little jalopy that's going to get you to Springfield. Okay? That's what Hollywood's making. The low bar is entertainment. Did I enjoy myself? Well, if that's your bar, good luck. But we're here to save the country. And we're here to change hearts. And we're here to guide people to the universal truths that can bring our country back to a good place, to being healthy again and normal again and sane and not a bunch of crazy weirdos. Okay. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to make films like Hollywood. We're not going to write stories the way the world does. We're going to do new, different things. The Bible says, sing a new song to the Lord, right? So if you think conservative art is all about singing an old song, you missed the point, buddy. If you think conservative art is about doing the same thing over and over again, you've missed the point, right? But these same values can find their way into our new modern stories, right? As we keep the things that matter and we lose the things that don't. And we find the new aesthetic, the new wrapping with an old good nugget of truth in it. Still useful, still valuable, still good for you. So that's how we save the culture. But if we don't pay attention, that's how the culture crumbles. All right, guys. So we love you. And Rebecca, I think, feels bad because she lost her phone without a good charger, but that's okay. We'll see her next week. And I'm hoping to get some great interviews coming up soon. But we love you guys. Have a great weekend. Later, guys.